This is Land of Havilah, 1 Kings 15. Rehoboam of Judah died at the end of the last chapter, and his son Abijam assumed the southern throne. We'll read Abijam's entire narrative, which is 8 verses, and then summarize. Verse 1. Now in the 18th year of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. He walked in all the sins of his father which he had done before him, and his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his God as the heart of David his father. Nevertheless, for David's sake, Yahweh his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem to set up his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. Because David did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, and didn't turn away from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. Now there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. The rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, aren't they written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? There was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. Abijam slept with his fathers, and they buried him in David's city, and Asa, his son, reigned in his place. Comment: Abijam was king of the south for a short while, which was Judah. He's called Abijah in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, so it's Abijam or Abijah. His father had 28 sons by various mothers, but Abijam's mother was his father's favorite. He loved her above all his wives, 2nd Chronicles 11:21. So it's not surprising that Abijam had the preeminent status among his half-brothers, 2nd Chronicles 11:22-23. The mother was Maacah, and it happens that she was the daughter of Absalom, who so famously rebelled against David. Verse 2 called him Abishalom, which is a variant of Absalom. Abijam's father, Rehoboam, took care during his lifetime to firmly establish Abijam's preeminence over his brothers. 2nd Chronicles 11:23 calls this a wise move. As a result, there was no mention of a power struggle among the brothers when the father died. So Abijam became the 4th king of the house of David, which ruled for 20 consecutive generations, father to son. So far there's been David, Solomon, Rehoboam, and now Abijam. 16 more generations to come. This was in fulfillment of what Yahweh said about giving David a continual son on the throne to reign specifically in Jerusalem, which Yahweh called, quote, the city which I have chosen for myself to put my name there, 1 Kings 11:36. So Yahweh is preserving David's line, and he's preserving Jerusalem. This is prophetic because David's line will lead to the Christ, and Jerusalem will eventually be, and this is quoting from Jesus, the city of the great king, Matthew 5:35. And speaking of the great king, Jesus was speaking of himself. We can expect Christ to return to take the throne in Jerusalem forever at some time in the prophetic future. Yahweh said he wanted David to have a lamp in Jerusalem forever, meaning a descendant, but Abijam wasn't much of a lamp in terms of righteousness. The lamp of righteousness went out ever since Abijam's grandfather Solomon fell away. Now Abijam's the 3rd dark king in a row, as it said in verse 3, quote, he walked in all the sins of his father, end quote. Nevertheless, during his short 3 years as king, Yahweh had patience with him, as it said in verse 4, for the sake of David and for the sake of Jerusalem. In verse 4, Yahweh caused Jerusalem to be established during that time, meaning no foreign conquerors came in. Abijam didn't acknowledge it, but he owed his success to his great-grandfather David. As verse 5 said, David did everything right except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. So Yahweh is giving Abijam success not because he's doing anything right, but because of what happened 4 generations ago. In verse 7, there's brief mention of war between Abijam and his northern rival Jeroboam. We find much more detail coming up in 2nd Chronicles, where we read that Abijam killed 500,000 northern troops and established dominance over Jeroboam. Abijam grew mighty, it says, and Jeroboam didn't recover strength again, 2nd Chronicles 13:20 and 21. So Abijam had a successful run from that standpoint, but Yahweh did not grant him long life. In verse 2, he only reigned 3 years. It seemed he died peacefully, and definitely coming up, there was a peaceful transfer of the throne to his son in Judah. Now on to that next generation, the 5th of the house of David, verse 9. In the 20th year of Jeroboam king of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. Comment: mother here actually means grandmother. It's the case in Hebrew that the word for mother or father is the same as the word for grandmother or grandfather. So Asa's grandmother was Maacah, and we know that from the earlier part of the chapter. Verse 11, Asa did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, as David his father did. Comment: to be specific, David was Asa's great-great-grandfather, so father here is being used the same way mother is being used in the verse before to indicate a male or female ancestor going as far back as you want to take it. So Asa did right, which is refreshing after 3 generations of darkness. We know he couldn't have done totally right in every little thing, but he, quote, did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, end quote, meaning Yahweh overlooked anything that wasn't exactly right. Psalm 32:2, quote, blessed is the man to whom Yahweh does not impute iniquity. Verse 12, he put away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. Comment: he put away the Sodomites, it says. Here again, the Hebrew word for Sodomites is kadesh, which most modern versions translate as male cult prostitutes. So this isn't saying that Asa looked under every rock for Sodomites, but he did put away the open, ritualized, cultic practice of sodomy. Furthermore, verse 13, he also removed Maacah his mother from being queen because she had made an abominable image for an Asherah. Asa cut down her image and burned it at the brook Kidron. Comment: that's Asa's grandmother, the one that his grandfather Rehoboam loved above all his wives. Asa removed his grandmother from being queen for her idolatry. This reminds us of what Jesus said, quote, a man's foes will be those of his own household, Matthew 10:36. So sometimes we're obligated to oppose even our own family members, even our grandmother when they're in the wrong. But God supports us. It's difficult, but Asa did it. If he wasn't willing to buck his family, he'd be destined to be like his wicked father and grandfather and great-grandfather. It's a big, big deal for someone to break out of the family pattern and make a righteous future for themselves. Verse 14, but the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was perfect with Yahweh all his days. Comment: it's not clear here what's going on at those high places. It could be some pagan worship that Asa failed to extinguish, Numbers 33:52. But there were also high places dedicated to the worship of Yahweh as well. There was a time in Israel that it was acceptable to bring sacrifices to Yahweh on the high places. This was after the glory left the tabernacle, but before the temple got built. Samuel did it, for example, made sacrifices on the high places, 1 Samuel 9:13. But now that the temple is up and running, there should be no high places of worship at all, because Yahweh commanded in the law of Moses that Israelites should bring all their sacrifices and obligations to the place that Yahweh places his name, Deuteronomy 12:6 and 7. That place is now Jerusalem and the temple. So Asa's failure to remove the high places could be a major or minor issue, depending on what's going on there. Since the second half of the verse indicates that Asa was blameless in this matter, it seems that the high places Asa failed to remove were most likely devoted to Yahweh and not to foreign gods. In Yahweh's eyes, it was a relatively minor sin, if there is such a thing as a minor sin. Verse 15, he brought into Yahweh's house the things that his father had dedicated, and the things that he himself had dedicated, silver, gold, and utensils. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Comment: this is the first mention of Baasha, king of Israel in the north. Baasha reigned 24 years, all of it coinciding with the reign of Asa in the south, and there was continual war between them, it says, but we have much more detail in Chronicles coming later. According to that, there was no actual fighting between them, just a cold war and a proxy war. Now more about that, verse 17. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might not allow anyone to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. Comment: Baasha in the north got right on Asa's border with a military outpost he built in Ramah, which was only about 5 miles north of Jerusalem. He constructed an iron curtain along his border with the south, so to speak. In other words, he put military on the border based in Ramah that kept anybody from crossing between the north and south. This happened in the 36th year of Asa's reign, 2 Chronicles 16:1, which was near the end of Asa's reign. So by this time the north was recovered from the 500,000 that Jeroboam lost. The sons of the 500,000 are now grown up, and they're looking to avenge their dead fathers. So with Baasha's troops on the border salivating for revenge on the south, what's Asa going to do? Verse 18. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that was left in the treasuries of Yahweh's house and the treasuries of the king's house, and delivered it into the hand of his servants. Then King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimmon, the son of Hazael, king of Syria, who lived at Damascus, saying, There is a treaty between you and me, between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent to you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may depart from me. Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa, and he sent the captains of his armies against the cities of Israel, and struck Ijon, and Dan, and Abel-Beth-Maacah, and all Chinneroth, and with all the land of Naphtali. When Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah and lived in Tirzah. Comment: Asa paid the king of Syria to attack Baasha's north. So while Baasha was agitating Asa on the south, he lost the land of Naphtali on his north, including the city of Dan, where Jeroboam set up a golden calf, 1 Kings 12:29. So that's been lost now. There's no mention of Naphtalites being deported, as they will be later on, just conquered by the Syrians. Coming later in 2 Chronicles 16:7, we find that Yahweh faulted Asa for hiring the king of Syria. Since Asa was so faithful and upright, Yahweh was supporting him without the need to call for help. In fact, Yahweh was going to give Syria to Asa. So it was a big opportunity down the drain for Asa that he called on the king of Syria rather than just trusting in Yahweh, 2 Chronicles 16:7-9. So again, we just have to be very, very careful that we don't underestimate Yahweh, and we have to consult him before we make any big decisions. Asa failed to consult. Verse 21 mentioned that Baasha lived at Tirzah, which is where all the northern kings have been living so far. But now that Baasha has withdrawn from Asa's northern border, verse 22, then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah, no one was exempted. They carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber, which Baasha had built, and King Asa used it to build Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Comment: when Baasha withdrew, Asa reclaimed and fortified his cities in Benjamin. Verse 23. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa and all his might and all that he did and the cities which he built, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in the time of his old age he was diseased in his feet. Comment: because Asa hired the king of Syria without consulting Yahweh, Yahweh declared that he would have war the rest of his days, which was less than 5 years. And he became severely diseased in his feet the last couple of years, 2 Chronicles 16:9-12. He sought the physicians and not Yahweh, according to Chronicles, so it was a sad ending in those last 5 years to an otherwise good and faithful 41-year run. Father, when the time comes, help us to end well. Amen. Verse 24. Asa slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in his father David's city, and Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his place. Comment: now from Asa's death in the south, we go backward in time 39 years to the north, to the time Jeroboam died and left his son Nadab king. Remember, Jeroboam's house is under a curse that every one of his male descendants will be wiped out. Verse 25. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he made Israel to sin. Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel were besieging Gibbethon. Even in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha killed him and reigned in his place. Comment: within 2 years of Nadab taking the throne in the north, an unrelated Israelite from Issachar killed him and reigned in his place. At the time, Nadab was preoccupied with attacking a Philistine city, and all Israel was with him, so it sounds as though some of the military did him in, led by Baasha. So the house of Jeroboam has been dethroned, as Yahweh said it would happen. Additionally, verse 29, as soon as Baasha was king, he struck all the house of Jeroboam. He didn't leave to Jeroboam any who breathed until he had destroyed him, according to the saying of Yahweh, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, for the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, and with which he made Israel to sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger. Comment, that was the fulfillment of Yahweh's word that he would wipe out Jeroboam's entire male line. There's no confirmation here of the word of the Lord in the last chapter that none of Jeroboam's descendants would be afforded the honor of burial, that they were eaten by dogs in the city and birds in the field. But Yahweh spoke it once, and no need to say it again. Job 33:14, quote, for God speaks once, yes, twice, though no man pays attention, end quote. Verse 31. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Comment, that's it for Nadab, who reigned until his 3rd year. Now moving on to what Baasha did when he took the northern throne, verse 32. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Comment, he had a cold war with the king of the south, as we read in the earlier part of the chapter. Now a statement coming up that establishes the timestamp of Baasha's rule, verse 33. In the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, the son of Ahijah, began to reign over all Israel in Tirzah for 24 years. Comment, Baasha reigned from the city of Tirzah, which was the capital of the north, starting with Jeroboam, 1 Kings 14:17. It will remain the capital city until another king down the line moves it to Samaria, verse 34. Baasha did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, and walked in the way of Jeroboam, and in his sin with which he made Israel to sin. Comment, the sin of Jeroboam is that he didn't allow Israelites to make pilgrimage to the south, to Jerusalem, to worship Yahweh. Instead, he established false religions to keep the people at home, 1 Kings 12:26 through 33. So Baasha is continuing in the same vein. And by the way, none of the coming 16 kings of the north will ever correct the situation. They'll all perpetuate the sin of Jeroboam. So far, since Yahweh divided the kingdom, there's been one righteous king in Judah, which was Asa, but there will never be a righteous king in Israel. 1 Kings 16 is next at landofhavilah.net, 1 Kings 16. This is the map of 1 Kings 15. Judah is the southern kingdom, Israel is the northern kingdom. In the south, Asa cut down his grandmother's image for Asherah and burned it at the brook Kidron, which flows in the valley between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. In the north, King Baasha of Israel built a military outpost in Ramah, but he withdrew when Syria attacked him from his north. The Syrian king took the land of Naphtali from him, including the cities of Ijon, Abel-Beth-Maacah, Dan, and Chinneroth. The Syrian king reigned in Damascus. In the south, Asa took the stone and timber from the fortifications that Baasha made in Ramah and built up some of the defenses of the cities of Benjamin. He recruited all Judah to help with the labor, no exceptions, to give himself a strong buffer from Israel. In the north, Baasha staged a coup and killed Nadab at the Philistine city of Gibbethon, which was in the territory originally assigned to the tribe of Dan. The kings of the north have been living in Tirzah. 1 Kings 16 is next.